You've entered Bookstorm with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. So happy to have you back with us, Bookstorm Podcast listeners in 44 countries, almost 50 states, and 586 cities. We are super grateful for you, and you're going to be very excited with who we have with us here today. We have Mary Kubica. You know her. She's the New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of quite a few books. The Good Girl, Pretty Baby, Don't You Cry, Every Last Lie, When the Lights Go Out, The Other Misses, The Local Woman Missing, and the book we're here to talk to her about today is, and I love the title, Just the Nicest Couple. Kristen and I loved this book, and Mary, welcome. So happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Let me tell our listeners who may know you or maybe have not read any of your work yet, a little bit about your bio because it's very interesting. You are a former high school teacher. You have a Bachelor of Arts degree from Miami University in History and American Literature. That is cool. Your first novel, Good Girl, The Good Girl, was an Indie Next Pick. It received a Strand Critics nomination for Best First Novel. It was a nominee for Goodreads Choice Award in Debut Author and Mystery Series. That is quite an accomplishment. Congratulations. Then your book, Local Woman Missing, was an Indie Next Pick. Also nominee for Goodreads Choice. A lot of Mary's novels have been selected as Amazon Best Book of the Month. They've been library read selections. Her books have been translated into over 30 languages with 2 million copies sold worldwide. Wow. She's been described as, by Kirkus Reviews, and I love this, a hell of a storyteller. We couldn't agree more. A writer of vice-like control. Chicago Tribune says her novels have been praised as hypnotic, thrilling, and illuminating by People magazine and the LA Times. She lives outside of Chicago with her husband and 2 children, and we are super excited she's with us here today because we can't wait to dive down deep into this very thrilling mystery.
Well, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Well, we're very excited too, Mary. We want to give our listeners just a little bit of the background of your book. So if you'll allow me, this was hard to summarize without giving away any spoilers, which I refuse to do. And we read a lot of books here on Bookstorm, but it was very hard to summarize this one without giving away something. So I'm going to try. Neurosurgeon Jake Hayes is missing. And at first, his wife, Nina, thinks he's settling down after a fight they'd had the night before. But then a day goes by and 2 days and then 5 days, and Jake is still missing. We also meet Lily Scott. She is Nina's friend and a coworker. And Lily thinks that she may have been the last person to see Jake before he went missing. Now, she explains to her husband, Christian, those circumstances, and they both agree that nobody can know what it is that they know. Now, they know that nobody should know what happened, the facts that's in their head, but this was very serious because Lily and Nina work together and they interact with one another, which was one of the really interesting aspects of your book, are those interactions. Now, Nina is out there looking for her husband, and she's not going to stop until the truth is discovered. And that sets the stage for an intriguing plot. And if you want to add anything at all, Mary, you're more than welcome.
That was perfect. You did a beautiful job. I know that this type of book is so hard to describe without giving too much away. I always get nervous that I'm going to say the wrong thing, but you did a fabulous job.
It's been described as twisty. It is twisty. So, well, good. With that in mind, if you are ready, we're going to go ahead and dive in. You want to kick us off?
I sure do. So I want to say to our listeners, we do every sort of genre here on Bookstorm. If you haven't been a mystery lover, just give this book a try. You're going to be a convert. So I personally am a mystery lover. I simply could not put this down. I read it in one afternoon. I devoured it. And I have to say thank you to Mary, because she realizes that the reader is an intelligent person. And you gave us sufficient clues to solve this mystery on our own. But you threw in some red herrings, a few bunny trails, the perfect mystery. That's what we have laid out for us here. The story has a lot of emotions running high that we can all relate to in the real life. Lily refers to one of the characters in this way: he just snapped. Christian talks about a character in this way: we've all been there before. We've all had moments where we freak out, where we act aggressively in a way that feels beyond our control. Sometimes it's a rage response. As the writer, you uncovered something that we can all relate to in our own human weakness. We've all been there to some degree, where we lose control of our emotions temporarily. And I wondered if you could expand upon why sometimes this is necessary, even for your characters in the book. It could be a release or a venting. Sometimes we need to let stuff go. But when does this lack of control cross the line into trouble?
Yeah. So I love, first of all, to create these characters that are relatable. They're flawed, but they're very human. And I think that they do things that we ourselves can see we can see ourselves doing in certain situations. So Christian, there are many references to people snapping and crossing a line in this book. And I think that, like you said, we have all, to some extent, had those moments in our lives. And, sometimes when you feel that rage response coming on, you might go for a run or do some meditation or, find some other outlet for it. But sometimes people snap, and they might punch something or whatever, or just do something, really that does kind of cross a line, because you feel like, I think it's like a can of soda that's being shaken and all those bubbles are rising to the surface, and you've got to find a way to open the cap and let that out. So, I think that there are many times that response definitely crosses a line, that you might hit somebody, you might do something illegal, you might, punch a wall, whatever. So I definitely think that there are times that it can become just too much. But the reason that I really like to include this is because I think that, again, it's so relatable. Like, I have these characters in my books that a reader may not like, but I want the reader to be able to understand the emotions that the character is experiencing, and to kind of think to themselves, yeah, I've been there. Maybe I would have handled this a little bit differently, but I've been in a similar situation, and I can understand what the character is feeling right now.
Mm-hmm. You did it. You have very relatable characters. Even if we dislike the character, we want to dislike somebody. We want to have a protagonist and the heroine. We want to root for someone. And you really brought us into the very being of this character, the way their thought pattern, their needs, their emotions. And I believe that's why this book is so popular. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I write almost all of my characters from that first person perspective, because I do feel like I can get a little bit better inside that character's heads and hopefully get those, emotions across to the reader. Because like I said, the reader doesn't have to like the character, and they may not, because they're very flawed humans, and they're put in these kind of horrible positions sometimes, or just really complex situations, and they're trying to figure out ways to get out of it. So they're not always making the best choices, but I definitely want the reader to feel like they can relate on some level.
And you did it.
Mary, your novel explores, I think, some very deep moral and ethical issues. One of them is the fact that humans justify wrong behavior with a variety of excuses. I'm going to list a few because we've all heard these in our lives. I did this because I love you. It's for your own good. I wanted to make sure you were safe. You ignored me and I needed more. Or she or he deserved it. Is there ever a justification for acting illegally or immorally? And one character, I just want to highlight this, and I'm not going to say which one, refused to justify wrongdoing even when she had a pretty good excuse for doing so. And I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Yeah, gosh, it's so, you hear those excuses all the time, and is it ever okay, to justify this bad behavior because of, a certain reason? Is there ever a justification for it? I mean, I think that there are times like self-defense, is it okay to like fight back or to hurt somebody in self-defense? I think that it is, so it definitely depends on the situation. But, again, I think that this is another example of that human nature, that sometimes we do things, because our back is against a wall and we're trying to protect somebody, or which we see quite a bit in this book, we're either trying to protect somebody or we're desperate to find answers. I think that those are kind of the two things that are really at play here. And people are making some poor choices to make these things happen. So yeah, Christian in particular is the character in this book that is making a lot of poor choices, but he's trying to protect his wife. And so I think that, as somebody who has family members that we love, whether children, spouses, siblings, whatever, if you have those people that you love and you think, I would do anything to protect them, I think that it's very relatable. But is it okay? Will a reader read some of the actions that Christian is taking throughout the book and side with him? I don't know. That's to be determined. I have heard from readers that, they're rooting for this person that is maybe making some unethical or even illegal choices. They're rooting for him to succeed because of the reason he's in the situation. But does it make it right? Not necessarily, it depends. But I know myself, there are definitely those times you're reading something or watching something on TV and you're rooting for that person who's making these bad choices or crossing that moral, legal line, but you want them to succeed because you think that the cause is right.
Yeah, that justification. And I love that a lot of your characters were making decisions in the moment when they were under the most pressure and not thinking about the fallout and the consequences 5-10 years down the road. And I love what you said, because we always are justifying our behavior, right, as people. But I think maturity comes in where you start examining the consequences down the road.
Yes. And like you said, so much is happening in the heat of the moment. People are making these decisions without thinking through, or there are a couple times that they do think through the consequences, but they kind of dismiss them because they're hoping they don't get caught. And the current need, that urge is so great to do whatever it is that they're about to do that they kind of dismiss the fallout. So definitely, but yeah, we've all been there. We're making these snap decisions. The pressure is on, and it's the kind of thing that in retrospect, you might think, was that the right decision to make?
Absolutely.
I love that. It's a very incredible talent that you as a writer could cause the reader to root for someone who might be doing something illegally. And I even thought to myself, maybe there's something within us that thinks, I wish I could do that. I wish I had the courage to do that. I wish I went for that like he did. And it's kind of fun.
Yeah, I can totally see that, because there are a lot of things that, especially again, Christian does that I think I would never have the courage to do it. Even writing some of these chapters, I'm thinking, I who have an idea how this is going to end, I'm still thinking, oh my gosh, if I was in this situation right now, I would be so nervous. And I don't know that I'd be able to do it. So yeah, I totally agree that, it's another reason that the reader is rooting for him, because I don't think we ourselves would necessarily be able to do those things.
Mm-hmm. It gives the reader a lot of things to think about in introspectively too. And I love this. We're talking a lot about Christian, but he said something that just made me think how this relates to the real world. He said, I've read that people with a higher IQ have a lower emotional intelligence than people with a lower IQ. He was referring to a few red flags within some of the characters in the mystery. but it caused the reader to pause and consider our own emotional intelligence and those people that we know. Could this be true? It sort of was intriguing. Do people with a very high Q have a lower emotional intelligence? And I just wondered, can you expand on your thoughts, why you may have included this character weakness in your book, or even in your personal real life experiences with this theory?
Yeah. So, and it's not necessarily fact. If you research it, you see it kind of both ways, that sometimes, higher IQ equals lower emotional intelligence, but you also see a higher IQ equals higher emotional intelligence. And sometimes you see things that say that there are no correlation between the two. So I definitely used, the facts that was most fitting for my book. And here Christian is referring to the missing Jake Hayes, who is a neurosurgeon, and he's incredibly smart and incredibly good at what he does. But, Jake is missing. So we don't get to hear too much from Jake himself. We hear about Jake from pretty much all the other characters in the book. And as a reader, you sort of have to form your own opinion of him. But Christian, is kind of citing that he's incredibly smart, but as he's, he knows him on a personal level, and Jake is a little full of himself, according to Christian. But he's also, looking online and reading some of the reviews that patients are leaving for Jake online and seeing that, patients kind of have a similar feeling, that he's a great doctor, but he has a terrible bedside manner, which, we hear that about doctors sometimes. So, it was definitely one of those facts that was it fit the purpose and definitely helped create this picture of a character that we don't really get to ever see as a reader. We just have to hear it from everybody else and then form our own opinions of him. But I mean, a fact like this definitely makes it clear how Christian feels about the man.
Mm-hmm. And it was fun for the reader to consider that, because we all know people of super high intellect that are less emotional, or sometimes I think don't have as much just plain old common sense. And we were talking about this before the show, that as you said, it's not everyone, but it's fun to consider these different personality types and throw in some people from our own real world that we know of. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, absolutely. And when you think about, street smarts versus book smarts, like you're saying, it's really fascinating. I can't tell you how many people that are just so incredibly intelligent, but the street smarts are really lacking. And so I think it's the same, sometimes too, people that are so intelligent might come off as just a little distant or cold, and so you just don't necessarily get that. And it might just be that they're completely introverted. It may not be that they have a lower emotional intelligence, but just that they're a little bit more introverted. So, it can be hard to judge, but it's so interesting, examining human nature and how these things may or may not be related.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I had a beloved uncle who was a brilliant writer and poet, and he could not figure out how to put a seatbelt on. And we used to laugh all the time and kid him about it, but
That's funny.
so true there. There's another underlying theme, I think, in your novel that relates to what we see on the outside is not always accurate. And I think this really ties in with your title. Behind the facade, sometimes people are really struggling with all kinds of things in life, really heavy issues, like maybe caring for an ill relative or being seen by their partner, or maybe a fear of loss or financial ruin. Everyone has these issues. And I was wondering if you thought that that should fundamentally change the way that we deal with people on a day-to-day level.
I mean, I think that you should always be empathetic to people, and there are so many memes that go around on the internet and stuff just about, you don't know what battles other people are dealing with inside. And I think it's just so true, and in this book, you do see a number of those inner battles that people are fighting, that sometimes they do make those known, but they don't always make those known. And I mean, I think so many of us, are kind of guilty of this. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, somebody will ask me how I'm doing and I say fine when I'm actually having a lousy day. This just, you don't want to talk about it, or for whatever reason you choose to keep those things to yourself. And so I just think it's, facts that all of us is dealing with some kind of struggle on the inside, whether it's, financial or a relationship, or you haven't been sleeping, or whatever it is. There's something that's probably affecting all of us. And so I just think that that's important to realize, when you're just when you're kind of, have an attitude with somebody, whether it's a friend, or somebody you run into at the grocery store, a stranger, or, that car that sits at the red light a little bit too long, or the green light, I should say, a little too long, and you want to, blare on the horn so that they would go. You just never know what kind of emotional state a person is in. So I think it's just best for everybody, take a breath, slow down, and just have a little empathy for one another.
Yeah, I like that. Having a pause and just taking a step back just for a second before you react, which ties really back to even your first question about those really sudden bursts of emotion and acting on them.
Yes. We can all learn a little something in this book too, I guess, right?
I guess so.
I think so.
We definitely recommend this book to all you Bookstorm podcast listeners. Give it a try. If you're not a mystery lover, we guarantee you're going to really thoroughly enjoy it. And Mary, can you give us what you're doing next? What's on your radar? What you might be working on?
Yeah, so I'm working on my next book. I'm always a little reluctant to talk about it when it's still a work in progress. Just number one, I'm a little superstitious about sharing too much. But number two, I am not a plotter. So my books take a different direction almost every day as I'm writing them. So I'm always reluctant to talk too much about it too, because by the time it's done, it may have veered off in a different direction. But I am working on the next book, and I'm at least 3/4 of the way through with it. I'm hoping to have a draft turned into my editor in probably March. And if all goes according to plan, I think it should be available sometime in 2024.
Wonderful. We're very happy to hear that. So we can enjoy this one for a little while and get ready for the next. And I want to tell all of our listeners, in the meantime, you can connect with Mary Kubica. You can find her on our webpage, marykubica.com. She's also on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Mary, it was a lot of fun talking with you here today. Just really love this book.
Well,
Hi,
thank
Mary.
you. It was so great talking to both of you. Thank you for the wonderful questions and for the chat.
We hope to see you back here again next year.
Yeah, definitely.
Lots of fun talking to Mary Kubica about this mystery with all of these intriguing characters with hidden personality traits and flaws and all kinds of things, much like ourselves, I guess. One thing that I took out of here had a lot to do with your second question. And it was this ability for people to justify wrongdoing or acting illegally, or how about even lying? This tendency towards chronic lying. It's almost habitual with some people. You start to tell lies, and before you know it, you're lying about everything, even things that don't matter anymore.
Absolutely. I mean, think about how many times we've heard in our lifetime, well, I didn't want to hurt your feelings. That's why I lied to you. Or I knew that was going to be devastating to you, so I didn't tell you about X, Y, and Z, cheating, infidelity, whatever. But, think about how much you must disrespect somebody to, lie to them, number one. But number two, to think what their feelings are going to be. Those are their feelings. They're entitled to them. And they are the ones who should be able to process those. You don't do that for them and remove that. Not to mention the fact that you're going to get found out at some point. And now it's an even worse problem that you have done to harm them. I don't know. What do you think?
I agree. I feel like, listen, even if you did something wrong or if you screwed up, you're better off just to tell the truth from right on the onset, because that old adage, the web of lies that we weave is so true. Once you tell one, then sometimes you need another and then another. And I also think sometimes lying for habitually liars, people who lie all the time, is a matter of low self-esteem. They don't want to admit that they didn't really go somewhere exciting over the weekend, or they don't want to admit that they made a mistake or had an error. So they weave these lies almost like a little mini fantasy world of their own creating. And they don't realize, oh, I'm doing this every single day now. I'm not telling the truth about anything. I think it's a very slippery slope, and one that can very easily be slid into. We've all lied. Let's just face it. I don't think there's anyone who hasn't lied at least once. Call it a little white lie or whatever you want, but we all have. It's this tendency to resort to that on a daily basis that is dangerous.
Yeah. And I think it's to manipulation and power in some respect. It gives you power over a person to know things they don't and to see them acting on the information they have, and it's not complete.
That's very interesting. I also, without giving away spoilers, I was very intrigued by this concept of losing our emotional control. And since babies are born, we lose our emotional control. There's tantrums, there's fits, there's teenage meltdowns, there's all kinds
Parent
of
meltdowns.
Parent meltdowns. It's just intriguing to me. And I heard Jenna Bush Hager say this week in an interview when talking about her mother, that her mother was a very calm person who never lost control and stayed very poised all of her life. And I was very jealous of this because this is definitely not me. I am pretty a level person, but we all have a little meltdown or a little anger. And do you think it's a good thing or not, Kristen? Or does it cross the line?
Yeah.
Can cross the line.
Oh, that's a very good question. I think when it turns into harm to others, whether it's emotional harm or obviously physical harm, we've gone too far. But it's very hard as a parent to maintain that all the time, patient, steady, calm demeanor. I can't imagine it, especially if you have more than one child, because that's part of what they do is test your limits and push you to those boundaries to see where your boundaries are. And that she's a better mother than I am.
Well, I love watching her because, of course, Jenna picks the same picks that we do quite often.
Yeah.
So I like to correlate and see what she's after and see what the similarities are. And it's fun to watch what she's doing. But, then again, I have to say to anyone who may say, I've never had an argument with anyone, or how about I've never had an argument with my spouse, I may say to you, that's not a healthy relationship. So to some degree, you have to expose your innermost feeling and your emotion, because if you hide it all the time, this cannot be healthy, and it would manifest itself in other dangerous ways.
Oh, that's a great point. I think a lot of times people don't think about the fact that there's a lot of good that comes out of conflict. Like you pointed out, first of all, there's that release, but also sometimes that's how you get to the root of an issue, the real things that matter. I always think about, for example, infidelity as being a symptom of a much bigger issue. And so until the infidelity, the conflict, we don't get to the much deeper issue. Right.
Yes.
And it's also a way too to get to creative things that we never even thought about because we were never forced to, and almost like getting fired from a job. You are now forced to confront what it is you want to do and how you want to earn money and support your family. And it forces change. So, conflict can be good, but healthy conflict, I think, is what we're after, and not some of these unhealthy ways like the characters in the book were struggling with.
Shh, we can't say anymore. Well, Bookstorm listeners, thank you so much for joining us again today. It's an absolute pleasure talking to you from all around the world. And I want to give a little shout out because you know why I have to. We're super thankful to this guy, our talented sound engineer, the Mr. Mark Carey. He's a household name now, I'm sure. He's probably going to get called for other jobs, and we're going to be hanging on to him, begging him not to go. But we're very grateful to him.
Hope you guys enjoyed the show today. See you next week.
And we're going to leave you with a few storm predictions to pique your interest, because we're very excited who we have coming up on the show. Chris Bojalian with his infamous book, The Lioness. We have CJ Box and Stormwatch. And we're bringing back our good friend, Alka Yoshi, because she has a book called The Perfumist of Paris that you are going to love.
In the meantime, stay on the radar with Bookstorm by visiting our website at bookstormpodcast.com. You can visit us on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on TikTok, and you may want to see us or some of our authors if you look at us on YouTube. Just search for Bookstorm and Podcast, and we should come right up. Until next time, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.